Hi everybody, and welcome to DnD Horror Stories with DnD Doge. In today's video, we have a story about a disagreement in a game of Dungeons & Dragons that leads to a married couple getting a divorce. A story about why it might be a good idea to let the other players know that you're stepping away for a moment while playing online D&D, and much more. But before we get into those, if you end up liking the video, I hope you would consider rolling a crit on the like button. If not for me, then how about for some kitties? Kitties always get likes, right? But with that said, let's get into some D&D horror stories. That time my DMing style ended a marriage. By Reddit user GGM. While it's technically true, the title is a bit of a joking hyperbole, but here's the details. I was DMing a heavily modified 5th edition campaign over Discord. The players in the story were me, the DM, the wizard, who is technically the match that started the trash fire, the husband, who I believe was playing a druid, the wife, who was playing a bard, and the ranger, who was there but not involved. The campaign was set up that the party was hired by a Grand Duke to explore the wilds of a newly discovered continent and establish a settlement on behalf of the kingdom. It was a highly sandboxy game that used a lot of settlement building and exploration rules that I homebrewed for the game. Everything was going well until, at one point, during session 9 or 10, Wizard asked the group, "Do we want to explore the new wilderness region or focus on improving the settlement first?" Husband wanted to build the settlement first, and wife wanted to explore. They then began to argue very publicly about it on the Discord. My big failing was not ending the session immediately, but in my defense, it was hard to tell that the argument was out of character, and not just a debate about what to do, until it was way too late. I kept trying to get the reins again, but husband was talking about wife's, quote, "not prioritizing things in life properly," and wife kept saying that husband was, quote, "always like this." I decided to end the session early. Literally only got 30 minutes in, when we would typically play for 3 to 4 hours. But the damage was done. The day of the following discussion, I received messages from both husband and wife saying that they had been fighting about this literally all week and were going to be getting a divorce. Well, that escalated quickly. They both said that they didn't want to play with the other and had decided to leave the campaign so everyone else could play. At this point, the party was cut in half, and the game soon petered out. I know that they obviously had a lot of issues outside of the game, but it is still weird that it was my game that was the straw that broke the camel's back. From time to time, when I'm hanging out with my D&D friends, we still bring up that time that my DMing was so bad that it destroyed a marriage. Well, it certainly sounds like that would be something heavy to be weighing on one's conscience. Though OP stopping the game sooner, like they said they felt like they should have, probably wouldn't have changed anything. Like OP said, this marriage was probably already teetering on the edge of divorce, but it just so happened that their disagreement in the game was the straw that broke the camel's back. It is always a shame to hear about people's marriages falling apart, but if D&D was the last straw, perhaps it just wasn't meant to be. On to the next one. Player wants me to change the backstory of NPC because she didn't like it. By Reddit user FewActive1079. This really sucks because I put quite a lot of effort into the characters and story for this game. A few of my friends decided that we should start a D&D campaign. All, except me and another guy, had never played before, although all of us have watched Critical Role and that's how the others got into D&D. There's me, and 2 other guys, and 2 girls. They all said that I should be the Dungeon Master, because I've been playing the longest. I've spent quite a lot of time in the last 2 weeks, helping them with their characters and backstories, and have been looking up artwork for NPCs and making a story. We started the game, and they made an adventuring party. The Guildmaster, who is a retired adventurer, gives them a quest, and as they don't have a healer, he sends one of his students with them. Now, for this student, I had made a story that her village had been saved by the Guildmaster when he was an adventurer, and that's why she became an adventurer and was training under him and looked up to him. One of the players, Sarah, while talking to this NPC, said that the Guildmaster looks lousy and incompetent, so the NPC takes out her weapon and tells her to take the words back. Sarah got really pissed about this and told me that I shouldn't be making such female characters who looked up to male characters in such a creepy way, and that I was taking away players' agency by not letting her roleplay properly. I had thought that this was a roleplay opportunity, but apparently not. She kept making remarks the entire session about this, how I should learn to make better NPCs, that it was cliché to have a girl be saved by a man, and that I should learn from Matt Mercer how to write better female characters. This led to us arguing and stopping the session early. I don't think we'll be continuing. Well, it seems like the Mercer Effect strikes again. I honestly don't see why Sarah had such an issue with this NPC looking up to the Guildmaster. I mean, it's not like the Guildmaster saved her village and forced the NPC into servitude or anything like that. It just sounds like the NPC was inspired and looked up to the Guildmaster in order to become an adventurer herself, which sounds like a character that is empowered, if anything. That, and having the NPC demand that Sarah's character take back her words against her mentor, sounded like roleplay that Sarah then took personally out of character. It kinda sucks that OP wants to stop the campaign over this, as it sounds like they put a lot of effort into putting the game together. If anything, if Sarah doesn't like the NPCs or the way OP runs their game, she doesn't need to be part of it. And I would say just to continue the game with the remaining players. Though, what would you do if you were in OP's shoes? Let's move on. Player gets mad that he went AFK without telling anyone and missed important lore. By Reddit user Odandy. Spoilers for Curse of Strahd. This story is about a player, let's call him Steve, who decides to get mad at me, the DM, when he went AFK during an incredibly important story moment and didn't tell anyone. Short and minor horror story, but basically, we're playing Curse of Strahd via Roll20 online, and the party meets Rictavio. The party earns the trust of Rictavio, who reveals he is actually an older gnome by the name of Rudolf van Richten. He reveals himself to be a gnome disguising as a half-elf when he takes off his hat of disguise. I was bending the rules a bit for hat of disguise, obviously. During this introduction, I could hear at least 2 out of 4 players comment or respond back to this revelation. Steve not being one I heard from, but Steve did not put anything into chat or say in voice chat that he was walking away, so for all intents and purposes, he was there hearing everything being said. Later, the party finds out that a lady has been asking around about an older looking gnome. Steve then starts asking questions like, DM, have we seen any gnomes? Does the person we're talking to know what a gnome is? And other pretty strange questions, since he's supposed to know that he met a gnome NPC not too long ago. I answer the best way I can, without directly saying, yeah, obviously, this lady is looking for the one gnome you met this whole game. But it gets to a point where I have to stop the party for a second to recap. I say, So you guys remember what happened when you met Rictavio, right? This was followed by silence. Then, one player pipes up, "Yeah, he was a gnome, right?" I affirm that. Then Steve asks, "Well, WTF DM, how does this person we're talking to not know what a gnome is? How has she not seen someone by that description we're giving her? We're literally describing." And otherwise starts getting really frustrated and aggressive with me. I cut him off and say, "Steve, what happened when Rictavio took his hat off?" There was no answer. I keep saying, "He turned into a gnome, Steve." Steve says, "Well, if he's a gnome, how does this lady?" I cut him off by saying, "Steve, I told you he was wearing a hat of disguise. His disguised appearance is a half-elf. I literally shared artwork of his half-elf appearance when you first met him, wearing the hat." Steve then says, "Oh, I think I walked away when you were doing all that. I just didn't say anything." Either that, or he straight lied, forgetting an incredibly important detail that I revealed earlier. I don't know. Very frustrating behavior from him, among other things. We're going to be talking about this at the top of next session, since I don't just let these things continue. If I'm reading hundreds of pages of lore and spending dozens of hours each week session prepping, Steven can put a BRB in chat. Yeah, it's not that hard to let the Dungeon Master and the other players know when you're going to be stepping away from an online session for a minute to use the bathroom or something. That way, the Dungeon Master can determine whether it's at a point where they can continue the game while said player is away, or if it would be best to wait for the player to get back if the story is at a pivotal moment. Like, for example, whenever I need to step away from my game, I just put this on my screen to let everyone know. I would say that OP is going to do the right thing here, and have a word with Steve the next time they get together to continue the campaign. Communication is key for any tabletop RPG, especially if all you gotta say is BRB. Let's move on to the next post. Player is furious that my BBEG is too sympathy-inducing. By Reddit user SilkSmooth32. Hey folks, hope you're having a good day. Also, forgive me for any mistakes in grammar. English isn't my native language. I'll try to keep this short. I've been DMing for a group for roughly 2 years now, and due to my style of DMing, which involves a lot of foreshadowing, clues, etc., they have just now met the BBEG. The thing is, when I was creating this particular fellow, I wanted to try something different from my usual. This particular villain has one wish, and one wish only. He wishes to die. Due to some circumstances, he is cursed with immortality. Yeah, we've all heard that story before, but I've never actually run such a story. I've always viewed immortality as the worst curse one can have upon oneself. To see everyone you've ever connected with crumble and disappear. To witness funeral after funeral. To never truly allow yourself to feel love or to be loved, for it will be ephemeral, and in the end, only you would stand, living, if you can call that a life. But why is he a villain, you ask? His life is painful. His existence is suffering. He wishes it to end, and will do everything in his power to do so. He has tried many ways, but none have really worked. Now, he will try the ultimate way. He will bring down the realm. He will destroy everything. For when all is gone, he hopes he will be as well. I thought it would be an interesting narrative and story to have a less, quote, power-hungry villain character. So, we've been building up to it over these 2 years. Now, they have finally faced him and learned of his ultimate goal, his reasoning, and his pain. This happened last session, and we ended on a cliffhanger when they learned about it. The problem arose when we ended the session, which I thought was absolutely amazing. One of my players became absolutely pissed. He started to shout angrily with words that I will really not write down, as I'm sure that they will not fit the sub. He claimed that I was ruining Dungeons & Dragons for him, that villains should be villains, that he didn't play to feel sympathy for his enemies. He claimed I was an absolute a-hole for trying to make them feel pity for someone they should defeat, and things really escalated, even though I tried to de-escalate the situation. My other players tried to reason with him, saying that it was a good story and all that, but he was having none of it. Truth be told, I've never seen someone that angry before, which honestly did make me slightly taken aback. He left my house, where we host our game, almost storming out. I apologized to the players who remained there and told them that this was not my intention. They seemed to have enjoyed the story and weren't really bothered by it, but the situation is sour, to say the least. Now, here I am, considering that I should just stick with the run-of-the-mill cartoon villains, which honestly isn't what I like, but I don't want to go through something like this again. Well, this is my story. I'm sure it's not as horrifying as some out here, but, well, it really did a number on my self-confidence as a dungeon master. Cheers, folks. TLDR. A player got furious because the BBEG had a very sympathetic story, and stormed out after cussing at me, which led to the mood of our table souring. Well, I think OP is being pretty creative with trying to make a BBEG that one can kind of sympathize with. Like OP said, not all villains need to be your cookie cutter, I want to do evil things because evil characters. I'm not sure why that one player would have such an issue with this. Maybe something else is bothering him in his life, and he just took it out on OP. Or he just doesn't want to consider having his character feeling a bit of sympathy for someone that the party will ultimately have to defeat, or something. But him acting the way he did was completely uncalled for, especially towards OP, who has been spending their time prepping, making encounters, storylines, and all the other time-consuming things that come with being a dungeon master. I would say the best bet would be to let that player cool off a bit, and then try to have a talk with him at a later time. Perhaps he will do some self-reflection and realize how much of an a-hole he was, and everybody can continue on with what sounds like a great and interesting campaign. Let's move on. How I Ended a DnD Game in Session 0 by Reddit user MetalGuyJ. Sorry if this is overly long. For context, I'm vision impaired, and this story happened roughly 10 years ago. It also remains my only experience I have with tabletop RPGs. A friend of mine, hereafter referred to as C, and I were talking one day, and somehow got onto the subject of Dungeons & Dragons. The more we talked about it, the more interested I became, and as luck would have it, C and his group were starting a new campaign at the end of the month. A week goes by, and he asks if I'm still interested in playing, and offers to help with character creation. I settle on Dwarf Barbarian, which I mention because it will be relevant shortly. The day finally arrives, and I'm introduced to everyone. 3 other players who won't be relevant for this story, and C's cousin, the Dungeon Master. Dungeon Master does seem a little off when meeting me, but I put it down to being the new guy. We all chat for a bit, laying out the ground rules, etc., and Dungeon Master asks to see everyone's character sheets. So far, so normal. He gets around to mine and sighs, then promptly tells me that I've made a mistake with my character sheet. When I ask what the issue is, the response went along the lines of, "Well, obviously, You forgot to mention that your character is blind. I reply that I didn't forget, and my character isn't blind, but then get quickly shut down by the Dungeon Master, essentially saying that because I'm vision impaired, my character must be blind, acting like it's a rule. So I just take his word for it, but do point out that had I known, I would have chosen a different class. Dungeon Master briefly explains that choosing to play a blind melee character is going to make my life hard, but doesn't detail how, and says I really should have chosen a magic user, but it's too late now. I'm far from happy about the situation, but decided just to roll with it, because how bad can it really be, right? Finally, characters are done, and before we close things off, Dungeon Master wants to narrate an introduction cutscene for all of our characters before we come back for the following week. Everything seems to be going as normal again, and I'm getting back into the spirit of the game. The highlight being C's character, a cleric, insisting to the wizard that holy water is a hangover cure. And once again, I only mention cleric because it's going to be important in a moment. We get to the entrance for my character, and the Dungeon Master asks me to roll. It's been a decade, so I don't remember exactly what I rolled, but I believe it was rather high. Dungeon Master then gleefully describes how my character trips over an object that he didn't see while trying to enter the tavern, causing general chaos and narrowly avoiding decapitation via his own axe in the process. Dungeon Master laughs his way through most of the scene, until C tries to have his character go over to check on me, at which point, the Dungeon Master's mood changes. He insists that C's character wouldn't do that, and when one of the other players chimes in, saying that it seems a little unfair to put my character through that and then stop anyone from going to help, Dungeon Master insists that he was actually being generous to the new guy. He then reveals that only a nat 20 would have been a success, and that he was being generous by not regarding anything else as a crit fail. At this point, C, the other players, and Dungeon Master start arguing, which culminates into Dungeon Master saying words to the effect of, "Blind people can't do anything. It's all C's fault for bringing him in the first place." C, the other players, and I pack up, shortly followed by a wizard, and all three apologize, and did not play with that Dungeon Master again. They did invite me to play with their new group a few months later, but I declined. Wow, what a frickin' dickhead of a Dungeon Master. Making OP's character have to be blind, and then pulling that introduction BS, just because OP is vision impaired in real life, is super scummy. D&D is supposed to be a way to escape our everyday lives, and just because OP is vision impaired doesn't mean his character has to be. I mean, none of us are elves or dragonborn in real life, though that would make life more interesting. If anything, it all seemed to be a way to get back at C for inviting someone that the Dungeon Master saw as less than. I mean, what an ableist piece of crap. Good on C and the others for leaving that Dungeon Master, and never playing in any of his games again. Though it is a shame that this caused OP to never try D&D again. Hopefully, someday OP will give it another shot. But that is all I have for you today. As always, I appreciate all of you, especially those of you who like and comment. And may your games remain horror story free. Until next time.